Hello, everyone. Today we're going to take a look at one simple trick in the annotated bibliography that will set you up for success as you go to draft your literature review later on. We're just going to look at one particular skill and how it's demonstrated. I'm going to take a look at a sample where we see a student do the harder work or set themselves up for failure later, and then see how that same student adjusted and set themselves up for success. So that's the only skill we're going to look at in this video. Don't worry about the content of these paragraphs in terms of whether or not they meet the standard for the annotated bibliography. We're just looking at this one component of your writing style. If we take a look here at the first paragraph, I've highlighted the language that sets the student up for failure later. When they're referencing the paper that they're talking about, they say this academic research paper, or the authors of this paper, or they. And the issue with that is it's too generic. And so this is going to create some difficulty if the student decides to cut and paste this material later into their literature review and they don't clearly identify who the authors are. The problem is now they have to go back and they themselves have to figure out who these authors are and clean that up in that literature review, which creates more work for them later on. Or if they never go back and fix it, what they're going to end up with is the possibility that the AP reader is going to get confused because as they're reading this material, they're not sure which academic paper we're talking about. Now, in looking at your annotated bibliography, this sample I pulled this from, right above it has the citation. So as I'm reading an annotated bibliography, I know exactly what paper they're talking about. But if I take this material and I put it into my draft and my literature review, there's a possibility that the classroom teacher can get confused, and more importantly, that the AP reader could get confused because we haven't clearly identified the authors. Now, if we take a look at how this student improved that skill later on in their annotated bibliography, I've now highlighted changes in the language that communicate the same ideas. What we see here is specific naming of papers. So we see authors' names, Heisel and Jalali, and we see how they are connected. But every time they're referenced in this paragraph, we see them named. We'll see later on here Heisel and Jalali's findings, or furthermore, Heisel's research paper. We also see that the students set themselves up for success by adding in the parenthetical in-text citations. This paragraph, as it is put together right here, could be lifted and put right into the literature review with very little editing. If we're just trying to talk about the connections of the body of knowledge to the work of this individual student, this second paragraph right here would fit very nicely into a first draft. Might need a little cleaning up on other skills later, but this is very clear, very specific, and will assist that student in saving time in the literature review and prevent the AP reader from getting confused later on. So as you're going through your annotated bibliography, make sure that you are clearly using the names of the authors or the title of the source, but I recommend the name of the authors. That will save you on some word count, and when we're paraphrasing is a more common practice than using the entire title of the paper, which, you know, if I just use the name Heisel or just the name Jalali, I'm saving on word count versus the very lengthy title of their papers. So as we go through our annotated bibliography, let's take a moment, make sure we've clearly identified the sources in both our first and second paragraphs so that we don't have to do as much work later on.